Hi, everyone. Welcome to the WWETT 2023. Our guest today is Max Gowdy with Liquid Force. Thanks for joining us, Max.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to talk to you. You have a lot of experience in the industry. You've been around a long time. How did you get in the industry?
This is a funny story. So prior to this, I worked in the concrete industry. I moved from a large multinational concrete company down to a little place called Leamington, Ontario. So I'm down there doing my thing with a local family-owned concrete business. We did forming and sold concrete, that kind of thing. So I'm coaching hockey, Canadian. So I'm coaching hockey. I'm coaching this gentleman's kids, a guy by the name of Jeff Lewis.
Okay.
And he owned a company called Liquid Force. I had no idea. I didn't know there was a trenchless industry. I'm in construction. I didn't know this stuff existed. So
yeah.
Coaching his kids, and he said to me one day, "You should come work for me." I'm like, "I don't even know what you do, man." He said, "Oh, we put liners in. It's really cool." So I'm like, it was about a 1.5 year interview process is really what had happened. And I remember where I was sitting. It was in a place in northern Ontario called Manitoulin Island. We were sitting waiting for the ferry to come with all our kids. And we kind of made a deal right on the bench there for me to come work for him. So I'm like, well, I'll go see if all this leadership stuff that I've took over the years means anything.
Right.
And go into an industry that I had no idea about. And it's honestly one of the better things I ever did. So I went to work for Liquid Force back in January of 2008. So I'm a fairly, I would call it a newcomer to this industry because there's so many people who have been doing it for 30 years, right? So I still feel like a bit of a rookie, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is one of the biggest challenges you've kind of faced since you've got into the industry?
Likely the biggest challenge I had, because I came from an industry that was really, the concrete industry been around forever. So they had their associations. It was really ingrained. And the trenchless industry in my mind was still so, I'll call it virgin or so new still, even though we think it's been around, like it's been around since 70 or whatever it is, but it hasn't developed. Like it's got so much runway in front of it, right? So just starting to get out of your own four walls, figuring out your own shit stuff, meeting people, starting to meet people in the industry and network so that, because I don't look at it as, I don't compete with, the other contractors that are here at the show. I compete with guys with backhoes. At the end of the day, we're here providing a service to, the constituents of our municipalities. And if I can help and learn from somebody, so I'm putting a good product in the ground that the acceptance of what we do is more acceptable and achieved, we're here to grow the industry as a whole. So we all do better as opposed to the other way around. So it's really just the hard thing at the start was making contacts and getting to know people in this industry, which is, it's really evolved now, because I remember the first time I come to the show, I didn't know anybody.
Right.
Now I don't even have enough time in the day to meet all the people that I haven't got to see all year. So it's really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. What do you think about the open cut industry versus the trenchless industry? Is there a lot of, maybe not a lot, but do you think a lot of people still look at open cut as the solution first before lining a sewer pipe, for example?
I do in certain areas, I would say. And in certain areas, you'll have engineers that's what they've always done and they don't want to look at it. And that's their choice, right? Yeah. And I think it's like anything. It's a tool. Like as much as I say the open cut guys are my competitors, but their process, there's a place for it. But it's not everywhere. Just like trenchless, whether it's CIPP or pull in place or slip lining, whatever. Yeah. It's just a tool. And sometimes we just got to remember, we don't have to be everything to everybody. We need to make sure that, the municipalities and the clients are getting what they need to fix their problems, not what we want to sell them. We shouldn't be trying to sell anybody anything. Right. We should be offering solutions and letting the people who can make that choice that works best for them.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. There is times where open cut's the only way to do things, and trenchless has a place, and everybody has the tool like you described.
Agreed.
Yeah. What has, in this industry, as after COVID and things like that, as things have changed in Liquid Force, how have you guys adapted to, ever since at COVID and then after COVID with labor shortages, things like that?
Well, we're dealing with the same thing as everyone with labor shortage. Part of it is, so a couple of things from an adaptation standpoint, from a positive, because there's not a lot of positives that people want to talk about coming out of the pandemic, but we learned how to do stuff, I'll call it more effectively from a communication standpoint. Like people are starting to use platforms and, before it's like, oh, I'll wait till I'm into the office. No, we can have a video meeting right now. Is it as good as in person? No, but it doesn't take, there's a good use to it, especially like in the group I've got up in Canada. We're spread out like between Western and Eastern, like it's 5-hour flight, right? Yeah. So but we're able to utilize those kind of services, and we're more deliberate about it now.
Yeah.
From a labor shortage standpoint, I think my own opinion is it's people don't know about our industry. Like I was in construction, didn't know about it. My kids wouldn't know about it if it wasn't for me being in this industry. So it's like, how do we let people know this is a viable career path where you can make a good fair wage and support a family or support your dreams, whatever that looks like. There's a lot, and part of this too. We also got a guy by the name of Sean McKeag told me this years ago that I got to know. He said we got to quit downplaying our industry. We don't have laborers. We got robotic technicians. If you think about it, I'm looking at these trucks out here, and I don't know how to run them.
That's a really good point.
But like we're going to have young people or people come out and operate these robotic trucks, but we call them laborers. We're not really doing it justice.
No, we're definitely not presenting to the world like our own value.
Yeah.
Like, even the job advertising. That's something that just what you said I started doing a while ago. Robotics technician.
Absolutely.
That's a lot more. That sparks interest. That gets a click.
I love it.
As opposed to field hand or laborer or whatever we would call it.
Yeah.
And also tying right back into that, I feel like as leaders, because we're both active in the leadership subcommittee for NASCO that we talked about with Joe.
Nice.
It's important to talk to our employees that way, and to tell them like you're doing something interesting, you're doing something cool, and to really harp on the fact that this isn't something that is simple.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and just to leapfrog up that a little bit, some of the that I've heard pushback up don't call robotic technicians, or they're worried that people are going to see that and say, "Oh, I'm not qualified for that." If we are whether you're putting on a deed or whatever, as long as we're putting in a description, it's a robotics technician. But let's call it at the end of the day, we're going to teach you how to get there. There's not enough educational facilities so a lot of it's teaching. Like people just need to know. I always look at I hire for, I'll call it value and cultural fit. I use a thing, Patrick Lencioni, this author that we use, but my thought is if I have the right person that is the right fit for my team, we can teach them the rest of the stuff. That's all teachable stuff. Exactly. The value and cultural part, that fit has to kind of reside within the person to a certain extent.
Yeah.
There's a spot for everybody, but
I think you're spot on. And we talk about culture. We talk about, bringing on robotic technicians and there are businesses. And I think that's where companies are not doing always a great job. Like you mentioned, like advertising or promoting a new way of thinking, like robotic
we have
technicians.
to build these guys and girls up.
Yeah.
And make them feel like they're doing something interesting.
Exactly. Other than,
because they're
going to be a laborer and jump in a manhole and, seal it up and get all dirty and nasty. There's got to be a better term for that too. It's like what you're doing is saving infrastructure for communities. You're bringing, you're preventing overflows or backups, things like that. We need to,
there's a power to language.
Right.
It's like what we decide to call things.
Yeah.
As an industry, we should be a little more, our chest out just a little bit.
Yeah. Just be deliberate about it. And I think as an industry, it's like habit, right? You start talking about it, and then everybody starts talking about it that way, and it puts your industry in I wouldn't even say a fairer light, but a more realistic light, because it is realistic. Like if you're sealing a manhole, you are protecting potentially a stream that somebody's kid's going to potentially be swimming in. Yeah. Right. And it's a big deal.
Yeah. Environmentally, that's overflows, water leaks, things like that. These all impact our environment. So what the people that we have coming into this industry to do the repairs and, keeping the maintenance up on the equipment is super valuable. So I think robotic technician is a great name.
Absolutely.
Right. Now you guys are both NASCO, right? You're in NASCO.
Yep.
I know you are NASCO Nick. What are you doing?
NASCO
Nick.
How about that? I like that.
We need to do that. NASCO Nick. What are you doing in NASCO, Max?
So I started, I don't even know what year I started at NASCO. I went originally because in the concrete industry, I was always part of associations. So you made a lot of relationships through there, so because for me, it's all about helping someone else, but also having someone there I can bounce stuff off. Yeah. And again, like back to my earlier point, in this industry, it was so new that it wasn't as developed that way. So I got going to NASCO. I think I was down in Duck Key or wherever my first one. And then the networking it kind of took and I was didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And I'm not really a guy that kind of just jumps out and starts shaking people's hands. My wife totally the other way, but so she helped a lot. But so 2 years in, I was asked if I would run for the board, so which I'd never done before. Been on a board, I'm like, I'll give her a go.
Yeah.
So and I've been there ever since. It's been a really cool experience. So this year I'm in the president's role.
Nice.
I'm going to end up doing actually 2 years in that role at this point, just because we had one of the gentlemen had to leave for personal reasons off the board, just because there's a lot going on in industry as a whole. So and it's a volunteer association, and it takes a lot of time, but it's worth it.
Nice.
So I'm doing that. I'm active on a bunch of the committees as much as I can be with my board duties or whatever. And I just believe in the industries, and I believe where Sheila Joy has taken it to from really being the source for all things trenchless from an educational standpoint, from a technical resource, and honestly from an advocacy standpoint.
Yeah.
Something that I've really kind of hold on to is the workforce development thing, and I just tapped the table that I was told not to. The work I talk with my hands a lot.
So don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm down here throwing feet.
So like the workforce development's a big deal to me. Like, how do we bring more people into our industry? So that and then the government advocacy. We haven't advocated to change the way our industry is viewed, but we also haven't advocated for our fair share of infrastructure funding, because honestly, how do we expect these our elected officials to know about an industry that I didn't know of in the concrete industry?
Right.
So it's like and it's very intimidating. I did my first DC fly-in, I don't know, 3-4 years ago.
Okay.
And I was really intimidated. I'm like, I'm going in, but they're just normal people. They don't know what we do.
Right.
My shtick was, hey, you wouldn't go and build a house on a foundation made out of toothpicks. And that's what we're doing when we're funding roads and bridges before we fix our underground infrastructure and know what we have. That's all we're doing. And then they're going to fall into a hole, and it doesn't make sense. It's not a good use of funds. So really excited about how that goes. And honestly, what Sheila Joy's done, our executive director, and on really getting clear on strategy, getting clear on the brand, getting clear on what we can do to make the world a better place is I can buy into that.
Yeah. I can't wait to talk to Sheila.
Yeah.
We'll set something up down the road. It'd be really great.
Yeah, she's great to talk to.
Yeah. And we got NASCO Nick here, so
absolutely
we're in good shape. But so talking about workmanship, I want to pivot a little bit to that. I spoke in Canada.
Yeah.
I spoke to Barbara Robinson from Norton Engineering. I don't know if you know her or not.
I know the name.
She's really passionate about I&I and construction and laterals particularly, because a lot of what she's finding in Canada is the laterals aren't sealed up. So workmanship in the construction process is not there. How do you think I think it's NASCO's with the leadership and things that you guys are doing. Do you think we can help that construction just create better workmanship?
I do. And that's what we do up in Canada is actually a lot of laterals within my group.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah. We do a lot of construction management stuff too, but our I'll call it our core business is a lateral, and it's not a easy thing to do.
Yeah.
It's really technical, but from an overall industry quality standpoint, I think as more and more people this is my opinion only, become members in NASCO, and we continue to help educate, we can bring the level up. Because if you think about it, it's an attractive industry. Like they're talking about, this industry flipping, to like taking more and more from the traditional dig and replace, if you will.
Yeah.
So we're going to have contractors jump into it, and good for them. I hope they do. But it's like, how do we help those new contractors not make the same mistakes that we all had to make because we didn't have the networks we needed? So I remember when I got into it, like I got into steam curing mainline lining, like there was nobody. I had one or two people that would kind of help me. But as another guy told me a long time ago, education ain't cheap. And it cost a lot of money to learn how to do it and do it well.
Yeah. And
really, I think we can help our industry by creating mechanisms to be able to share experiences. And I'm not talking about people sharing the proprietary stuff, but share minimum standards of knowledge. And that is one thing that NASCO is trying to work on. It's a big thing to grab onto. Through the Workforce Development Committee, they want to create curriculum. We would like to create curriculums for every type of discipline there is. So I think we're starting with the Grout Committee first because they've got a bunch of stuff together. Lori Perkins from Wright Pierce is on our board. And she had the best, in my opinion, the best idea. What I would love to see, and this was, I'll go back to I used to be a lineman in Ontario, so I'll explain where this come from.
Yeah.
I'd love to see like an industry, I'll call it funded or industry whatever, training center. that trains on the basics. Because if I'm a small contractor and I could send my 2 guys that I just hired after 30 days, I know they're good to go. They're going to stay on. I can send them somewhere so they're not getting that on the job. If I have time training, because let's call it what it is, that's what it ends up being.
Right.
Wouldn't that be good for our industry as a whole? And I stole that idea a little bit, and then Lori really took it, ran with it. I was a lineman in Ontario Hydro for a bunch of years, and there wasn't a normal apprenticeship school for that. So they had actually basically, because it's a conglomerate in Ontario, it's kind of what they do. So they had a facility up in Orangeville, Ontario, and what you would do is, I'd start my lineman career, and then after about 6 weeks with a journeyman, they would send you up there for a week, and they had other journeymen. So you would do in class, theory, and you go out in the field and do practical, climbing towers, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I envisioned something the same for the underground industry, like CCTV operator. They work for a guy for a little bit. He goes and sends them to the NASCO training school for CCT operators. I'm obviously not into the branding part of it because that's not very. But they get there, and somehow we train them on the basics of what would meet the minimum standard that we need as an industry.
Right.
So I also kind of stole that a little bit from the concrete industry I was in, because basically in Ontario, the more members we had, and then we would create standards. So there would be a minimum standard so that you could hold your association credentials. Well, what it is, it helped bring the quality of the industry up. So, some guy that was doing forming walls, all of a sudden he thinks he's going to go do bridge decks, as an example, which is very technical. If that bridge deck fails, all it's doing is creating an opening for a competing technology. We're competing, right?
Right.
So we need to keep bringing that minimum, and help these contractors that are coming in to hit that standard earlier, as opposed to black marks on the industry, because they're learning.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, every other major industry has some sort of educational infrastructure.
Yeah.
Plumbers, HVAC, electricians,
Yeah.
just about anything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Except us.
Yeah, we need it.
And we're involved in some of the highest value, highest importance part of the community's infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it too, if we do it wrong, the cost to repair is exponential compared to some of those other. And actually, I'd love to take credit for all this, but it was Tim. I don't know if you remember the name Tim Vivian. Tim was with Green Mountain Pipeline. He was one of our past presidents in NASCO. This was his thought process. He wanted to have some kind of an apprenticeship program where we could help teach those skills. So he was. I'm taking credit for a lot of stuff that other people come up with, but I think that's where, as an association and industry, if we could get to that point, it would really help.
Yeah, I got involved in the workforce development committee because I had made a training program at a previous employer and had kind of done a micro version of this, week-long helper, which we had to come up with a better name, right? Helper introduction program that teaches for CCTV, the absolute basics. These guys don't know how to read a grade rod, right, off the street.
Yeah.
Some of them don't understand upstream and downstream, or have a concept of what the heck is under a manhole cover, or how to open a manhole cover properly and safely. So I had kind of developed that on a very small level. So I heard about this. I was like, well, I got to get involved in that.
That's great,
because it seems as a former contractor, it's immediate value.
Yeah.
I mean, you've taken, just like you said, 6 months of when I have time training. You can condense that down into a week. You've made sure that they've gotten the training, that you didn't forget anything. You're training as you go. Oftentimes things get forgotten.
Yeah.
So I think it's
Well, and a lot of time you're creating habits too. Even when I was going through mine, like you would go for the first week and then you go back to your workplace for 6, 8, 10 weeks.
Right.
You might go for another week. So I see it as almost a continuous, almost like an apprenticeship training.
Yeah.
So that you can help build those habits.
Well, you look at business, right? As new contractors or existing contractors are bringing in more workforce, it impacts their production too. So if you bring a new person in and your crews are already focused, working, and they're getting things done, you're going to slow them down. You're going to impact the way they're doing things day to day. So having an apprenticeship for them would make sense as a business owner, right? Is send them off, get them trained. And you're preventing the potential loss of an employee too, because if you have maybe someone that's in your team that's not the greatest and they don't mesh well, and that person gets a bad taste, and then you potentially lose
I mean,
somebody
the
that's
feedback that we
valuable.
got was all positive.
Yeah.
Employees felt more valued because they felt like you were immediately investing in
them. Yeah.
And that goes a long way. We talk
Big
about
time.
employee retention and the struggles we have in hiring. Like, we should do everything we can.
Well, and to your point, even from a retention standpoint, I remember when I first started, he was a really he was a good foreman, like from an experience standpoint.
Yeah.
But there was this mentality of like, if they're here 3 months, I'll learn their name because I know. And I'm like, how many good team members did we lose because we didn't create a safe environment for them to feel comfortable to ask a question and let alone be safe?
Yeah.
Because they weren't valued off the get-go. So if you imagine you walk into a room, people make you feel comfortable, you're more likely to be engaged. You're more likely to ask questions so that you don't hurt yourself or whatever the case may be. We just need to change that mentality and create that, I'll call that safety net.
Yeah, that's true. Because if you end up getting with someone and they're just not invested in you, like you said, they don't even know your name. They don't want to know your name for 3 months. There's no employee who wants to go there and work. I wouldn't. Like, what's the point of me coming to help you guys?
And they have a lot of options right now.
Yeah, it's very competitive.
100%.
Very competitive. So as NASCO is putting together this program, and it sounds like it's all still kind of new, but coming together.
Yeah, it's going to take a while.
Okay, so I was just wondering when the launch could be or how
so
things are going to.
I don't want to talk for Sheila, but I think what we're doing right now is because we try and do so much with the volunteer base and everybody's so busy. So at times we're starting to take a little bit more of the mentality of, okay, that's the direction we want to go, but we're going to pay somebody to kind of get us over the finish line. Yeah. Because, it's like being on a committee. You're trying to take on stuff and you want to, and then your job, pulls you away. So again, I think we're starting with the grout because the grouting committee, the ICGA, did a lot of work putting together kind of the basis for a curriculum, if you will. Yeah. And with we developed that learning management system, which kind of COVID drove us there. We talked about doing virtual stuff for so long, and then within 2 weeks, because we had to, from a training standpoint. So our learning management system. So we're going to try and do stuff like self-paced e-learning, all that kind of stuff to kind of get it rolling. But we'll start with the grout, and then as the other committees provide content to help build that career, and we're gonna hire a consultant to honestly write that because there's nobody that is on the. We all would love to, but we don't. That's not our skill set. No, exactly.
Sounds like it.
I wouldn't even know where to start.
Right. Yeah, and you're gonna have different ideas. I mean, well, we do it this way. We do it this way. Right. So we'll kind of have to come to a consensus.
Absolutely.
How do we want the people coming into the industry to do it?
Yeah, it's exciting, and I think we should teach them how the industry really works. We talked about procurement. We talk about like that system. The customer success portion of it, making sure that they know how to engage homeowners when they're out doing work in their front yards in the street. And these homeowners come out and talk to you. How are you going to engage the homeowner there? That's a constituent within the city.
The employee doesn't fully understand what he's doing.
Right.
He certainly can't explain it to a frustrated homeowner.
Let alone know how to deal with that frustrated homeowner to bring the temperature down so they can hear what is going on in the truth.
Right.
A lot of these homeowners, they'll even get the notice of project or whatever, but it's like junk mail sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. All of a sudden, somebody's in the front yard and they're like, "What's going on?"
Yeah. They're hearing it through their bathroom plumbing, like all the sounds and everything.
With smoke.
Or that's another 100%. That happens a lot. So as we put in these new apprenticeship program down the road, how do you think we can attract new business owners? Because I think that's we're going to need a lot more contractors. How do you think maybe this program you guys have maybe would go with business development too? Just something to think about. I'm curious.
I kind of think my first gut reaction to that is I think as the market itself changes and moves into a higher volume of trenchless, and hopefully that'll be through our advocacy efforts within Washington D.C. and within the Canadian government as well. But I think you're going to see a lot of traditional open cut contractors look at this as a viable option to open up a division within themselves as well to be able to fill some of that contracting void.
If you look at the money that could potentially come because we have this massive infrastructure gap, right? There's a lot of funding that potentially could come out in the next 5-10 years. We don't know what that will look like, but if we don't have enough contractors to do the work, that money sits there, and if it's not done within the year, the money disappears, right? So we're going to need more contractors and just being able to fulfill those projects requests.
And I think having that educational system and support system. that NASCO
It's
provides,
going to be vital.
I would think it's comforting to someone who is thinking about entering the industry, knowing they have a resource.
Yeah.
And also, like with understanding from the contractor standpoint, new business owner, what does that look like? So because how often do you hear people say, "Oh, that's coming," so they gear all up, they spend a lot of capital, only for it to sit. And all of a sudden, they're selling off or what. Like, so it's all that. It's that timing of supporting the need from a capital resource standpoint as well. It's easier said than done, so to speak.
Yeah. And being able to teach them how to run a business is going to be vital if they want to do that. And educating them that process, because they don't teach you how to run a business in high school or college.
There's so much to that.
It's not.
Short story. So I remember I started my career as an electrician. I was going to be an accountant. My dad was a bank manager, and they said I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
So the day I was supposed to pay to go to be an accountant, I went in and said, "I don't want to do this." He said, "Well, you don't have to. What do you want to do?" And I thought he needed an answer right then. So I said, "I'm going to be an electrician." I just pulled that like right out of my back pocket. Not a lot of thought put into it. Anyways,
Right.
But I remember when I was working for this electrician, I'll little story about him in a minute, but I always thought, "Oh, I could do that. I could run this thing." And then you get there and you're like, "This is hard. This is a lot harder than you ever thought." Right. And so to your point about how do you help business owners continue to evolve their skill sets and not the normal strategy that people talk about, which is your technical stuff about where's my market, where, the normal, but the cultural strategy of how you can build an engaged team based, workforce that's going to be loyal and going to feel engaged and want to get up, and it's not a job to them. We're going to create not a job, but so back to my electrician days. So this guy was one of the most intelligent, I'll call it, from a technical can-do stuff.
Yeah.
But from a building that team-based culture, it didn't come natural to him, right? And I look at so many businesses, the ones that figure that out and talk about strategy from a cultural standpoint as opposed to technical.
Yeah.
It's hard because as an accountant, you can't say, from a technical, you say, well, the return on investment's this. But from cultural, when I'm investing in people in that, you can't put a number on that, but I can tell you it's exponential. Because when people are valued, when they're engaged, when you give them what they need to move forward, it exponentially hits your bottom line.
Yeah.
But it is so hard to manage. That's part of the problem. We talk a lot about like the cost of a bad hire. But tied right in with that is cost of bad management and cost of, like you said, not providing that culture that people want to be at.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Nick, you got a great culture at Essential Equipment. I see your crews and your pictures and all that stuff.
I've got a great crew.
You do. You have a great setup down there.
But that's also something that's good about these events and events at NASCO, and that we can sit and have those conversations and learn from each other, because that's stuff that's good for the industry as a whole. So however, and we've had some conversations, Dick, about how you built that culture on our workforce development leadership group. And Joe Schodfer was the one that wanted to kind of get that started up. And I kind of thought about it from this standpoint. Instead of me having to go out and read 20 books and get something from it and figure out how to implement it, when you talk to someone that's had some experiences and they said, at this moment it was this, and I talked to this person, I read this document, whatever, and I implemented, this was the impact. That just exponentially moves the learning for the group as a whole forward. So I'm hoping that takes off a little bit more. I know it was a bit of a rocky start there, but we'll get there.
Well, it's all, everybody's, fortunately we're all busy.
Yeah.
We should be worried if we didn't have anything else to do besides, recommend books to each other.
True. Absolutely.
So I think, as we help educate, get the apprenticeship programs going, and, our future technology is going to be take a huge role in that.
Yeah.
I would assume you guys are looking at getting the robotic technicians, teaching them how to repair cameras, for example, stuff like that. But also we need to teach them how to use software.
Yes.
That's a massive issue right now with, some of the software is just too clunky. There's like multiple buttons these guys have to do out in the field on their iPads or whatever. There's going to be that. We're going to have to teach how to use tech.
Absolutely.
I think we still have a portion of the workforce that's not computer literate.
Right.
And we're going to have to address that.
Yeah.
Even if it's very trade specific training, we can't forget that we have to teach how to read the grade rod, and we have to teach how to transfer the files from the GPS unit to the laptop.
Right.
Well, I think as technological vendors, we also need to spend more time possibly getting input from the guys that are actually using it. So you can see it from their perspective, because, you see it from and I'm not a tech guy, but you can see it from a technological standpoint as whether it's, I don't know, we use like HCSS or whatever, and it does so much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, that's almost too much stuff for some of the guys. So if you were able to get your technician out in the field to say, this is the way I see it, we might be able to still take advantage of all those benefits, but make the user experience a little bit easier for them too. Because we think it's all easy, but then you realize you're doing it all the time. But,
Now, I know we're getting close to time, but I want to talk about your experience and kind of going into culture and things that are happening in the industry. Private equity. They're buying a lot of these companies up.
we're just going through it.
You're going through it, right? I've gone through it recently in the last couple of years. You have. Where do you think private equity is going? Is it going to gobble up more companies? Or is it going to be? What's your opinion on
I think for the most part it's attracting funds, absolutely, because as our industry becomes a bigger deal and funded better, 100%, I do think. And I think it also gets a bit of a bad rap. So it's not for everybody, obviously, and everybody runs it different. I think it's just important. So my role, so we're just going through an integration right now. So we were part Liquiforce ourselves we were purchased by Granite Construction back in 2008. 2018. I started in 2008. And then we were just our group with what we call the Old Kenny Construction Group and Lane Inliner. So we were Inliner Solutions. So we were just purchased by an equity firm out of New York, JF Lehman, and brought together with another group. And I think everybody worries about that, but the culture is driven by the managers, within certain business units, right? So I can decide to sometimes just create a culture of chaos, which I'm sure if you ask my guys, sometimes I do because I'm a little all over there, but I try not to. It's not right. You know what? But it's up to us to decide to determine what that is. Like as with anything, I explain to my guys, like if you invested in a 401k or an RSP in Canada, you want a return on that, just like any investor would. So that there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But in order to do that, we got to create a good engaged culture within our group to be able to move that forward. And then bringing groups together. I think something that if I could give, I'll call private equity my opinion on something, and this may be broad, it's being patient enough, knowing when you bring people together and you're trying to create those synergies, that takes a lot of time. And I know they want to go fast. A guy I know that's in the industry, in that world said, Max, like 3 months is 3 years. Like you gotta go faster. I'm like, I can go as fast as I want, but it's only going to go as fast as I can let the people take the information in and let them adapt to it. You can't drive it to change them too fast, because we all move at a fast pace, but you can't take more advantage of them than you should, because that's when people just get frustrated.
And there's nothing fast in B2G.
No,
not at all.
No.
So the expectations, I hope they understand that it's not going to happen overnight.
But our experience has been, it's been challenging, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you need to get challenged so that you don't get complacent, if you will, right? But it's finding that balance. So I know, like the leader I work for directly, Denise McClellan, and she's been really good about keeping people and culture top of mind as we go through these challenges. And she does a great job of, reaching out and thanking the group for, rising to those challenges, even when she knows, like, people, it's like a Friday and you got to get something that we didn't anticipate. Just that acknowledgement and acknowledging to people that, hey, you've gone above and beyond, and we'll get there, and thank you for your efforts to this point. That's, she kind of inspires me from that standpoint. She always does that day. It's great.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So Max, I know we're at the time, but how can people get a hold of you? How can they reach out?
I'm on LinkedIn. I think you can get my information through the NASCO website of the board of directors thing, or email or phone, whatever.
Your cell number? You want to get
yeah, sure.
No, I'm just kidding. Don't You'll have spam calls everywhere.
Yeah, we don't want that. I don't need to gas any more people that I don't.
Nick, did we miss anything? Is there anything else we want to talk about?
Oh, I think that's good.
We're good. All right. Well, thanks,
always
Max.
do it.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
guys.
for joining us. Yeah, it's been great.
Awesome.
So enjoy the show, guys.
I will.
Thanks.